Hello YouTubers, this is The Giant Awakens, and today I want to talk about a very important topic, 25 questions to ask about 9/11. Back, in 2001 when 9/11 first happened, I, like most Americans, bought the story, hook, line, and sinker that our government was telling us, and, I really didn't question anything that happened that day. I mean, it seemed pretty straightforward what they were telling us. And as months went by and years went by, and I started listening to the stories of the witnesses that were there that day, and watching several documentaries and researching many stories about 9/11, I've come to my own conclusions, and there seems to be more questions than answers that our government has been giving us, and it's just, I think, led to more untrust of our government. So I just want to go into about 25 questions that I've come up with. I'm sure there's probably tons more that you can come up with, and if you have any, please post them at the end of the video. But these are, I think, the major ones that I've come up with over the years that I would like to ask if I were in front of one of these committees. And the first one would be why did George Bush wait over 15 minutes when the first plane hit the World Trade Center? It seemed to me, if you were the leader of the number one superpower of the world, wouldn't you want to find out what's going on immediately? Our nation is under attack, and he decided to sit there and calmly continue reading to the class. I mean, I thought that was unconscionable at the time. I mean, who would do such a thing? Number two, several hundred witnesses inside and outside the buildings reported bombs going off, including reporters at the scene. Many of these witnesses reported that bombs were going off inside the World Trade Center buildings, including World Trade Center 7, and including reporters at the scene. You can watch some of the videos and hear them, say it on air that they heard explosions. So who are we to believe on that? Number three, several witnesses reported unmarked gray aircraft with no windows hit the World Trade Center and not American Flight 11, as we were told. And if so, where did Flight 11 go? Where did that plane disappear to? So, there were many witnesses on the ground that's saying it was a gray aircraft. It seemed like a military aircraft, and, not Flight 11. Number four, why did World Trade Center 7 fall at free fall speed? Many of the videos you can watch, show it falling at free fall speed. You can watch videos of other buildings that have fallen during a demolition, and it looks very similar to a building that was pulled down, demolished, basically. And number five, why were several explosions heard inside World Trade Center prior to coming down? There are several witnesses that have come forward that they heard explosions inside World Trade Center prior to it coming down. Number six, who had the most to gain from the collapse of the towers? If many of you don't know, Larry Silverstein, his company, had a lease on the Twin Towers at the time, and it was noted that they were going to need more than $200 million in improvements to the Twin Towers, and they had a major asbestos problem that had to be removed, so that was going to cost them a lot of money and time. So what better way to have the Twin Towers come down and have new buildings put up and profit from that. Also, they were insured about 6 months prior to that, to any attack. Number seven, why wasn't there any plane wreckage found at the Pentagon? If you've seen any plane crash, you're always going to see at least a wingtip, a tail section, an engine, which are huge. How could you miss one of those? Something from the plane. There's always something, but if you notice in plane flight, in 93 and the Pentagon, there weren't any in the pictures. You can look at them. There weren't any parts of an aircraft found. Number eight, where is the missing $2 trillion plus that Donald Rumsfeld spoke about days before 9/11? I mean, supposedly from the Pentagon to budget $2 trillion. I mean, that's a huge amount of money. Think about that back then. What our debt was back then, $2 trillion. You're talking about, close to 40% of what our total debt was. I mean, that's an amazing amount of money. Number 9, who profited from shorting American Airlines stock days before 9/11, and who tipped them off? So, there were people that did profit from American Airlines tanking on 9/11, and somebody must have been tipped off for them to get that information. Number 10, why was there military exercises going on in the days leading up to 9/11? Vigilant Guardian, you can look it up, was dealing with terrorists who planned to use explosives over New York City. NORAD was also doing a simulation of exercises day before 9/11, basically doing the same thing. So why were they doing that days before 9/11? It makes you wonder there. Number 11, why was NORAD told to stand down while all this was taking place? There were many senior officials who told NORAD to basically not do anything while this was taking place. It's, unbelievable why they would do that. Number 12, why weren't fighter jets told to shoot down the supposed plane that hit the Pentagon? They had plenty of time to shoot down that plane if they knew, they knew that where it was headed, its flight direction, yet they chose to do nothing. Here's a little article about Secretary of Transportation Norman Mineta, who was in the Presidential Emergency Operating Center with Vice President Cheney at the time, and as Flight 77 approached that day, he said, during the time the airplane was coming in to the Pentagon, there was a young man who would come in and say to the Vice President, the plane is 50 miles out, the plane is 30 miles out, and when it got to 10 miles out, the young man also said to the Vice President, do orders still stand? And the Vice President turned and whipped his neck around and said, of course the order still stands. Have you heard anything to the contrary? So basically they were to stand down and basically do nothing while the plane came in and hit the Pentagon, or the supposed plane. Number 13, why did George Bush say he saw the first plane hit the World Trade Center when he couldn't have? The footage was never shown. In the morning, during that day, the only plane I saw hit was the World Trade Center 2. It was only till later on that a brief footage was shot that showed the first plane hitting World Trade Center 1, so he could not even known about that. Number 14, why was no plane wreckage found at crash site of 93? It goes back to also in the Pentagon. The same thing, there was no tail section found, there was no wings, no engines, basically nothing. Everything like vaporized, basically. Number 15, what important documents were kept inside Building 7? If you do a little research, SEC had several cases, including one deal with Citigroup and WorldCom bankruptcy at the time, and so all those case documents were basically destroyed during the takedown of World Trade Center 7. Number 16, why was the largest attack on U.S. soil cleaned up so quickly? Think about this. This is the largest criminal act of the U.S. history, and yet what were they doing? They quickly put the fires out and immediately had dump trucks ready to pick up everything, and we were shipping off tons of material, tons of steel basically over to China. I mean, this is crazy. Think about this. The largest crime scene ever, and we're sitting there just cleaning up the mess like it never happened. Number 17, how did the hijackers fly sophisticated planes when they could barely fly a Cessna? If you go to some of the videos, you can go to YouTube, and it talks about how some of the flight instructors were saying that these guys could barely fly a Cessna, that they did not have the advanced knowledge to fly such a large aircraft, and it takes years of practice to do that. How did they do that so quickly? I mean, it's beyond me. Number 18, how did cell phones work inside the aircraft at the altitudes they were flying? I mean, think about that for a second. I've tried several times, including last week I was flying. I tried using my cell phone a minute after we were up in the air, and I had no signal at all. There's one gentleman made a good point. He says when you're flying through so many cell towers so quickly that you don't have the cell station doesn't have time to pick up your signal. So there is no way that those cell phone calls could have reached the family and friends that were trying to contact during that time, especially at the high altitudes that we're flying at. There's no way. Number 19, where did all the missing gold go from the World Trade Center buildings? Hundreds of millions of gold was supposedly removed from one of the basements of the World Trade Center buildings, and to this day, a lot of it has never been recovered. So where did that go? Number 20, where are the black boxes from all these flights? Usually in every flight, a black box is found. I heard they found 2 of them, I believe, in the World Trade Center bombing, and when they hit, and they weren't able to, I guess, recover any information from them. They talk about how they were severely damaged, which is unbelievable. Number 21, why were the fires at the World Trade Center building burning for several days and intensely hot? It took several days to put out these fires, and many of the firefighters interviewed were talking about how it was so hot that it was melting the steel. It was like a pool of lava, basically. Typically, from a fire that's just caused from an accelerant like diesel fuel, they're noted not to get that hot. So how did this happen? Number 22, why was smoke coming out of floors way below where the planes hit the World Trade Center buildings? There are several videos on YouTube where you can see smoke coming out of floors, 20 or plus stories down below where the planes hit, and there's already smoke coming out of those floor windows. So how is that happening? Number 23, what was the object on the belly of the second plane that hit the World Trade Center? If you look at it, if that was an American Flight 11, why was there a cylindrical object on the bottom that shouldn't have been there? So what is that cylindrical object on there that makes you want to ask a question about that? Number 24, why weren't any videos released of the supposed plane hitting the Pentagon? All we get is this huge flash ball, Think about this. This is the most probably protected building in our country with the highest sophistication of cameras, the walls are several feet thick. Why wasn't there any other video of that day of a different angle? Think about it for a second. They're keeping that information from us. And number 25, how did a plane pierce through 9 feet of reinforced concrete at the Pentagon? Each of those rings is about 3 feet of reinforced concrete, and it penetrated through 3 of them. And a plane is when it hits something, it's made to break up to disperse some of that energy, And so how in the heck would it cause it to go through 9 feet of concrete is beyond me. So I'd love to have that question answered. So these are basically the questions I have. If you have any of your own, please post them at the end of this video. And I'd love to hear from you about this. I think it's very important that we, try to get to the bottom of this, because I think our government is withholding a lot of information about 9/11, and it's going to be up to us to force their hand and find out really what happened on that day. So that's all I have for today. Thanks for listening, and sign up for my YouTube channel yet if you haven't done so, and have a great day.